with how he's been playing. So uh, I'm not sure. It was pretty close. It was a tough decision. A lot of times I just click the call button because I have trip aces there. But I just really didn't see him bluffing there very often. I think it'd be a pretty crazy spot to try and rep a bluff. So I assumed that he didn't have a bluff, and I folded. Uh, and defend the queen 10. And going to probably just be check folding. Okay, now that he checks back, I put him on a weakish type hand, meaning a low pair or an ace high maybe. And this is a really interesting play on the turn because I just go ahead and lead because I can represent a pretty wide range. His range is likely fairly weak on the flop. Like he could have a deuce or five, a good amount there. Uh, he could have a decent amount of hands that he's folding to a turn bet. So I went ahead and bet, and then he makes this small raise, and this raise by him is absolutely terrible to make against good thinking players. And why is that? It's because he's raising when a flush gets there and like the ace gets there, and he really can't have like a flush in his range or a straight in his range or anything like that. Really, the best hand he can have is like assuming that he didn't slow play, a set or something like that is like a two pair hand like ace deuce or ace five. Those are really the best hands that he can have, and that's only two hands. There's a mess of other hands, and by his raise size, it really looks like he pot controlled the flop with something like ace seven, hit an ace on the turn, and if that was the case, the absolute best play for him would just to be to call on the turn and not like, hey, I hit my ace, I'm gonna raise now. And he raises a really small amount, which is this play is just horrible because he can't have any spades he can't really have a flush or a straight or a strong hand at all. But we can. So against a good player who knows this and knows that his range is sort of capped out at a certain point. It doesn't have hands that are the nuts or the second nuts or at like the strong range of hands at all. His range when he checks back the flop is kind of capped out at a certain level, whereas our range is not. We can definitely have a flush. We can have straights. We can have sets. We can have two pairs and stuff like that. When against a good player, they will recognize this when someone's repping, a range that they just can't really have, and we can totally have. It's just a spot where it becomes a kind of profitable against the thinking player to just re-raise with any two cards and just sort of play back at him just because of this and the fact that he just really can't have a strong hand. So I instantly just say, all right, you can't have a flush or a straight or like really like two pair sets or anything. So I am just going to be re-raising you, and I am going to be shoving. He snap calls, which it's kind of interesting, but it really makes me believe that he just has an ace that much more. And I shove pot size on the river. If you notice, I set that up pretty well. He raised to 18, I made it I think 60, and which is pretty decent raise size. And I was doing that with the intention of shoving on the river, because I think in that type of a spot you need to have a multi-street bluff to knock him off his his ace most of the time, because he calls on the turn, but he'll fold on the river when you shove. So I had that in mind from the turn when decided to just go with the bluff. But that's a pretty advanced bluffing spot that I think a lot of good players will pick up on and just kind of bluff the heck out of you if you're doing something like that. Uh, and it, for him to be raising there, he should really never be raising there unless he has that super small, range that he's representing, the check back spades or something like that. I really, really hate, raising in that spot, unless you have something like the flush, because it's good players are just going to just 3-bet you and shove the river. And I contemplated 3-betting with King Queen, but I really haven't done it at all yet, so I didn't expect it to get looked up by many dominated hands or anything like that. And I was going to be check raising the flop, which is also kind of a cool point about not always 3-betting King Queen, is that you can start to check raise more flops with your top pair good kicker kings like this. I was definitely going to do that, and if you do that, if you flat hands like King Queen instead of always 3-betting them, and even like Ace King too, and throw them into your flatting range pre-flop, you will widen up your flop check raising ranges on stuff like king high boards and queen high boards, assuming you do like the same thing with like ace queen from time to time, because your opponent, if they're thinking and they're gonna put you on a range of hands, like when you check raise, let's say a king 8 deuce flop, they're gonna say, okay, this guy, he's pretty tight and aggressive. He plays a pretty good game. He 3-bets a decent range of hands. So he's probably 3-betting king queen and ace queen, and he's check raising this flop. So like really the only value hands he could be check raising with are sets, two pairs. Two pairs are very unlikely, and the thinnest he could really be doing it with top pairs, king 10 or king jack. So this guy's range is way too small. I'm going to float it, or I'm going to 3-bet him and play back. But if they know that you're calling king queen and like ace queen from time to time, now your check raising range on the flop just got a lot wider, and you're stacking off with more hands for their value. So it'll be harder to play against you just in general in the future if your villains know that you have wider ranges. Does this guy know that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly on his hand reading ability, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. It's some pretty good food for thought if you plan on playing some more advanced opponents who can read. And he looks like he called there with the 5-9, which was a turned pair, and he called 2 barrels with it, which was pretty. I don't really like it, but he did check back the flop when he had complete airball, complete whiff on the flop. So that's something to take into account on, and it was on a pretty good flop to be c-betting, king 8 deuce. Pretty hard for me to be check raising that, like I said, with a lot of hands for value. And he goes ahead and 3-bets. And I think it's at this point that he starts to become a lot more aggressive, and this is kind of what I was getting at with regards to how to play against opponents when you're getting run over. And this guy's gonna just be 3-betting me a lot.